Hey friends, welcome back to another Seed Talk with Lisa and Layne. Hey Layne.
Hello, Lisa. I love your backdrop today.
Hey, I love my backdrop too, and I'm just learning to love it even more and more. So I can't wait to talk about it.
Yes.
That'll be a really fun one. So, friends, before we dive into today's subject, just a reminder that this podcast is made possible by thegardenersworkshop.com, where you will find everything cut flowers, seed, tools, supplies, books, courses, and we invite you to visit over there, which is what keeps Layne and I busy during the day. So, Layne, what's today about?
So today we're going to be talking about something that I'm really happy is back on trend, and it's going to be dried flowers. Yes, I know, I saw you get excited. So back in episode 58, we actually talked about some cool flower, aka cool season hardy annual drying experiment results. And today we're going to follow that up with a warm season drying experiment results. So we're just going to go through a bunch of different warm season
Yeah,
flowers that have been dried and just talk about how they dried, which varieties seem to do the best. Did they hold their shape? Did they hold their color? All of that sort of stuff. And if you're watching us over on YouTube, you'll also be able to see the beautiful images as well.
I'm excited, Layne, because this is such a great time of the year to talk about that. So
It
let's
is.
jump in.
And also, by the way, nothing fancy was done to dry the flowers we're going to talk about today. They were literally just hung upside down and air dried.
And I think that's a really good point because people are often asking us, do we spray them? I mean, the whole point is what we dry are leftovers. And so we really don't want to invest any more into them, right? And so we were pleasantly surprised with how beautifully stuff dries with no additional inputs.
Okay, so we're going to start with one that I think is pretty well known for its ability to be dried, and it's going to be gomphrena. So gomphrena is known for holding its shape and color really well. Are there any varieties that seem to fade more than others that you've noticed?
Well, I think the ones that start out more vibrant hold deeper color, like the purple, which is my just all-time favorite for both fresh bouquets and also even in drying. And the white, I particularly am drawn to because white is just such a great color that makes everything else pop. But I know that the carmine and strawberry fields and purple are the most vibrant colors, and they really dry well. While the other varieties, the Audra, we love them dried also, but they're a little bit more muted.
Something I do really like about the white that you mentioned is I feel like you can see more of the structure of the flower on those
Yeah.
lighter colored ones, which is really pretty.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I really feel like a lot of the end result relies on when you actually harvest them and actually hang them to dry. So often, I know in our case, we often are trying to resurrect old flowers and make another use. You know what I mean? We wait too
Yes.
long to hang them. And I do think that plays a role in how well they hold their color. Like we have white gomphrena that dried pretty white, and then we have some that turn tan. So
Yeah.
it's the same variety. So it's really about the conditions. So as we have moved into drying more stuff because of the model we're following now, we're finding we're getting better quality dries because of that. And in the gompphrenas, I love them all. And they hold their color beautifully. The purple, particularly, really is vibrant.
And these are so great for all sorts of craft projects and wearables.
Yeah.
They look so cute in little boutonnieres and things.
Yes, and actually, Lucy, my little niece that helps us on Wednesday, who is the official gomphrena harvester, the girl harvests so much gomphrena here on the farm. I had her start making little bundles yesterday out of them, preparing for us doing some crafts, whether it's Christmas ornaments or wreaths. And yeah, there's just a lot that can be done. But I do believe that it's beneficial to do that prepping while they're fresh. Like she had just cut them out of the garden, brought them in, and just made like little short 4 inch or 5 inch bundles that are rubber banded small so that they'll dry just that way. And then we just gather the bundles and make something. So that makes it really easy.
Okay, now we're going to move on to celosia, and there's a bunch of different species here and different varieties. So there are the coxcomb, the celosia cristata, and there are also some celosia spicata, which is the wheat type celosia, as well as plumosa, which are the plumes.
Yes.
These are just a favorite for drying.
Yeah.
Some varieties have a tendency to fade, but others seem to hold their color really well, and they all pretty much hold their shape really well.
This could be a whole discussion in itself, right? There's just so many different coxcombs and plumes, and we have just experimented so much over the last 2 years with drying. We don't compost anything anymore. It's like we use it for the use that we have for education and demonstration, and then they're immediately prepared for drying instead of letting them sitting around in a bucket. And we are just pleasantly surprised with many of even the celosia plumosas that have maybe not such as big a head as some of the others. They're just beautiful. One of that I absolutely love is flamingo feather. Who
I love
knew?
that.
Oh my goodness. It is as beautiful dried as it is fresh.
And can you describe how that one looks when it's dried?
I wished I could reach it. I'd reach up there and grab one. It's a blonde. It's like the coxcomb that we're looking at in the middle of this image. And friends, if you're listening to this on a podcast, you've got to go watch this on YouTube because Layne has slides. It's that blonde. It's almost like the bleached flowers, which I know that was a thing.
Yes.
That's a process. That's how they look naturally. And they're just really, really beautiful. And I could just see a whole dried wreath made out of them. I love solid wreaths, all one variety. I don't like the chaos of mixed up flowers. I can see them being a really great candidate for that.
And because they're lighter, they do reveal that texture more, like I was mentioning with the lighter gomphrena. Which of the
Yes.
coxcomb, Lisa, have you found to hold their color the best when they're dried?
Well, the way the story goes is that the Kramer's coxcomb was actually hybridized by Mr. Kramer, bless his heart. He and his wife, we lost them probably 8 years ago in an auto accident. They're Pennsylvania flower farmers, and he sold for many years to the New York dried market. So everything he grew, he was drying. And so he hybridized and just selected those seeds that are in the Kramers, which is a lime green, a rose, and a burgundy. And they are said to hold their color better than other varieties. And I can't say whether that's true or not, because we haven't grown a lot of Kramers. We grow some, but we don't grow enough to really compare whether that is true. But I will tell you that we grow a lot of coxcomb here, and you're seeing a mix of it on this slide. And they all have beautiful qualities, no matter what you're looking for. The red that you see down at the bottom right, I believe is the red orange chief. And that one is really holding its color. But once again, I will just mention that I think it's the stage of harvest and then the stage of hanging is what really helps them to keep their color as bright as possible.
And even the ones that do tend to fade, they're still so beautiful and textural. And that muted color palette is something a lot of people are actually going for.
Well, that's like the inside of our homes are like, right, white and tan, and that just blends right in. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, Layne, it highlights the crevices and
Yes.
That's what I love about coxcomb.
Me too. All right, now we're going to move on to amaranth. And this is another one that, whether it's fresh or dried, it just has so much texture and it does hold its shape. The colors do seem to fade for certain varieties, and for others, they become a more muted version of their former selves. But I think it's in such a beautiful way.
It is. And, the amaranth, we grow a bunch of different varieties. And what we learned 2 years ago when we started drying them is that the draping, hanging varieties should be dried in that position. Flowers, one of the things I've learned about drying flowers is that you want to dry them in the position, like if it's in a bunch or in a bouquet, you want to arrange it the way you want, because after they're dry, there's not much moving them, right? And so that works really well to remember with the hanging amaranths. We just put them in a bucket with no water over somewhere and let them dry in their natural position. But they do make beautiful drieds, and they make incredible wreaths that also, if you intend for it, to make a wreath for outdoors under a carport or something, and the birds will feast on them. It's pretty cool.
That is so fun. Do you want to describe some of the colors and how they ended up looking once they were dried?
Sure. So there are several greens. And so those kind of fade to a tannish brown, but I find that the reds and there's coral fountains, they tend to hold a little bit of their color. And as you can see in this image, I mean, there is a really lot of nice red hues going on. And I just think it makes for a really beautiful mix. I mean, again, for making wreaths and different large, because, you know, some of the amaranths can have really large heads if you don't pinch them. They really make for fun, like behind the couch, large containers kind of things.
Yes.
Good potential there.
Yeah. And I love that if you do dry some of the trailing types upright, so they have that cascading look, you get a little bit of movement to your dried flower arrangement, which isn't always
Yeah,
easy to get with dried flowers.
it's true.
Okay, now we're going to move on to a variety of different grasses. If you're watching over on YouTube, we're looking at some millets as well as some other grasses like lowlander and highlander, which we also covered back in episode 98, by the way. So a lot of the color has faded on these, but they really hold their shape and they have the most incredible texture.
Yeah, it's that texture, isn't it? I mean, all those
Yes.
seed heads. And again, this is a great one to make a wreath to hang for, you know, Thanksgiving, knowing that soon after it's going to be devoured by the finches, you know? It's really a lot of fun. And I love the different grasses because they have different seed heads and you can
Yes.
really make some fun stuff with this. And, you know, again, that would be a great one in an urn behind a couch or something, because the limelight millet, which is the biggest heads here, is a draper, and it could really be fun. I mean, and you're right, dried flowers are so coming back in that I think people are really starting to experiment and just reconnecting with dried flowers. And I think there's just nothing but a lot of options. I mean, I just think it could be so fun to make a wreath out of this as I'm sitting here just talking about it. You know what I mean? That would be really cool.
I think you need to do that.
Yeah.
All right, now we're going to move on to a really colorful one. If you're looking for something in the orange or yellow or gold family to just add such a pop of color to anything, you might want to look to marigolds.
You know, marigolds were a surprise to me how much color and these actually are 2 years old dried that you're looking at in this
Oh,
picture because it's in this display behind me. And so I'm pretty excited that we have a whole new crop hanging from the ceiling in here. And to actually have solid colors together really will give a good idea or two. But these are a great pop of color, a great
they
pop.
are. They really are. And because the flowers are naturally so full and ruffly when they're fresh, they still look full and ruffly even when they're dried.
Yeah.
And we're probably looking at a lot from the Cocoa series here, right,
Yes.
Lisa?
I was going to say, I just did see a video yesterday from Dave Dowling. He is out at the cut flower trials in California, and there is cocoa improved. And I don't know
Oh,
what the improved part is because we love cocoa already. And I can't wait to hear about that. They were just gorgeous, just
yeah.
gorgeous.
All right, and then we're on to our very last one, and this is going to be sunflowers. And this is one we've gotten a lot of questions on this in the past, like, can you dry sunflowers? You can.
Yeah.
Can you describe which varieties you found are the best, Lisa, and how to go about drying those?
Sure. So we did a lot of experimenting through the years, and the conclusion that I have come to is that I grow primarily pro cuts. And some of the pro cuts have really long petals. And I don't necessarily think that is the absolute best choice. But that's what these are that we're looking at. And I've also learned that they should be just about fully open and hang them as soon as possible. And that's what we did with these. I believe that these were the bouquet mix bunches that we're looking at here. And they did really well. I mean, you need to have petals to have color, and you can just dry just the discs. Those are very interesting too. So you
Yes.
can pluck the petals off. But again, it's just all about harvesting them at the right time and getting them hung and getting them dried. But I do think that maybe with the sunbeam, sunbright, which I believe we have which has a larger disc and shorter petals, I believe, is another great candidate. Then I look at sunflowers like Vincent's, and not Vincent's, is it Vincent's Fresh or Choice that's got the brown center?
Choice.
So Vincent's Choice, which has lots of double row of petals, we haven't dried that one, and that's out for the verdict. I don't know if that would be better or not, So we're still experimenting, but I love this color. Muted, but you can still tell they're yellow. There's still some color there. Put that on a wreath would be incredible.
And this is one that if you want the petals to be more visible on the face of the flower, make sure you do hang it upside down so that those petals will kind of dry, collapsing over the center, so they'll be visible. If you dry them standing up in a vase, they might end up flopping down, which maybe that's what you're doing. It's just something to be aware of.
And that just reminds me of something. One of our bouquet delivery customers, a business customer that for years got 2 bouquets. He took one home to his wife and he had one for his front desk. And one, I can remember several years ago, I walked in the back to get water for their vase, and there on the wall was a coat rack. And what they had done was hung every old bouquet and had dried it that way, not separating or anything. And they were beautiful. And they had, by the end of the season, they had like 20 dried bouquets to use during the summer, use during the winter and the off season. Wasn't that a great idea?
It is. And that's such a great thing to do, because sometimes dried flowers can be frustrating for people to work with. They can be brittle, they shed or fall apart, they're fragile. So if you just already have the bouquet made, that can just make it so much easier when you want to go to use it.
I mean, and they were really pretty. And the other thing, what I observed there, their coat rack was really high. Doctor was really tall. Is they looked cool hanging on that coat rack. Like that was the display. You know what I mean? Because you could see the bottoms of them. It was really beautiful. So, I mean, I think there's a lot for us to explore in the dried flower circles.
I agree. And I also, one more thing I wanted to point out about these sunflowers is I love the contrast of that really dark central disc, which is still really dark in the dried flowers, versus the lighter petals that are that sort of muted yellow color.
Yes, totally agree with that. That really creates a lot of interest.
All right, well, that was it for this episode about some warm season tender annuals you might want to think about drying. And we would love to hear what you all are growing for drying. What are your favorites? You can go ahead and leave that information over in the comments on YouTube if you're watching over there, or you can use the form linked in the show notes to let us know. And thank you so much for joining us again. Always be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. And just thanks again for being here. We appreciate you all.
So Layne, thanks for a great program, slideshow. And I can't wait for us to do even more dried flowers.
Yeah, I want to see those wreaths that you're going to be making.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Okay, now I'm on the record, right?
Yeah.
All right, friends, until we meet again. Ciao.
Bye.